Yo, how many of those books you read back there?
Maybe I've dabbled. I'm a dabbler. So I would say I read half of them.
Okay, 50%.
Yeah.
One out of every two I scroll through, you probably read. That's what you're telling me, huh?
Yeah, but I'm a dabbler though. So the way I read books is I'll read this book, and then I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Let me get into that." Boom, and I bookmark that joint. Go to another one, bookmark that one. Then I have like a combination, and then I go through it again and I read it.
So you haven't finished none of them, then?
No,
Nah.
most times I finish them. Well, when it hooks me,
I do that with some books too.
When it hooks me, forget it. I'm stuck with that book for a while. I may even reread it. That's how much I like it.
Yeah, I got some. What's that book you gave me? It was years back when we lived together about the story. You put me on with that book, the story of the kid in a refugee.
I saw it in the house, by the way. Yeah,
yeah, that's yours.
I was about to collect on my book, bro.
You could have, bro, for sure. I read that book, man. It was a book I really enjoyed, man.
Yo, it got to the point, right? I gave away a quarter of my books. It got to the point where I had to start putting my name in the book because people were not giving my books back.
Thing, bro. I get because you just forget, bro. I've
like,
been.
Oh, I like that book. Oh, that's interesting. I want to read that. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. I had to start giving out library cards. Like, what's good with y'all? When we were living at the 167 house, because I had so many books there. It was crazy.
Word.
All right. Today we're talking about voter suppression on minorities. Is it really happening? But before we get there, folks, I got a question for Savory here.
Okay.
And that is, how long, why is a certain place like New York City been blue for so long? And let me throw this fun fact in there. New York City in the last 122 years. You know how long Republicans had held office in the mayor office
in New York?
Yeah. And in 122 years. Huh?
Oh, no. 12 years, maybe?
33 years.
Damn.
In 122 years, Republicans have held the mayor's seat in New York City for 33 years.
That's crazy.
Of that time. So sporadic. Like, it's just blips of time throughout so it's like, it's so crazy that we've had such a shift. And I'm sure, and if we look south, we've saw like a culture shift, right? Like, it went from blue to red, and it stayed red for so long, right? It don't really change. So did you ever, like, when you were growing up, wonder why New York City was blue?
Yeah, not really too much. Now I do, because I'm more into politics and kind of like these kind of discussions. But yeah, I think growing up, it was just more the blue side, Democrats, younger and kind of vibrant city. I'm like, yeah, we vote blue. And then you have a certain image of people who vote red down south, big house, land, guns, whatever. And, that's as deep as it went. And I think most people, unfortunately, right, my description right now, most people, unfortunately, would give you that kind of same breakdown, which means they don't really know why they're voting. Most people don't know what they're voting for or why they're voting.
So they're just voting because it's blue.
Exactly.
If I'm in a blue state, I'm gonna vote blue. If I'm in a red state, I'm gonna vote red.
Imagine it's my first time voting, right? You're a few years older than me. My cousin voted before. My uncle voted before. They all voted blue. Why in the world would I go now out to vote and vote red? Unless I did mad research and research books. At that age, you're not doing none of that. I'll just vote blue.
So essentially, like, we're not voting to change. Like, I like the way things are, so I'm gonna vote blue. I live in New York City. I like the way things are. I'm gonna vote blue. Or does it matter?
I don't think it matters at an early age. There's a few voters that it does, but for most voters, they're just going through the cycle of like, blue loves me, red hates me. Let's vote blue.
Well, the red are the racists, they say. On that note. What's up, y'all? And thanks for tuning in to another episode. I think we're at 95 now. We are
Ooh, we're gonna hit
steady
that 100 mark.
streaming.
Wow, we hitting
They
that 100
call us
mark. Bro.
hustlers of the stream game. You feel me?
Keep it 100 mark. We gotta, we might have to do something for that
Do
episode.
something special. Yeah, you're watching Drinks with a Nobody. I'm Macho, that's Savory. And we're here again. We're talking about all week. We've been already starting this conversation of vote suppression on minorities. Is it really happening? So we're alluding to the idea already that it's not happening.
Oh yeah. Title gave it away.
You got us. I mean, it's not really happening. They're just gaming us. Anyways, I wanted to open up with a video just so we can get some rapid reaction in our inner city talks segment.
I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. What happened in Selma is part of a far larger movement which reaches into every section of America. This bill will strike down restrictions to voting in all elections.
Today we celebrate our noble tradition by signing our newest civil rights law, the National Voter Registration Act.
All I keep thinking about when I see that man's face is, I do not have sexual relations with that woman. You know like that's all I keep thinking about.
I want to know what this was, right? Like, I'm very curious, right? Because I feel like we got everything we needed. So from the 60s, 70s, 80s, I think 30 more years, it was something we missed that we didn't talk about for this equal voting thing. Like, I'm curious at reading this registration act that Bill Clinton.
So you think they did this, the voter bill half-ass, and then that's why they needed to come behind it?
What I can tell you this, right? And then you can play it after this. This probably, if we dig into reading this bill, it probably has a whole bunch of other things in the bill has nothing to do with voting. This is how these politicians play, right? So that's my logic, but yeah.
Of 1993.
Today, we renew a bill that helped bring a community on the margins into the life of American democracy. I am proud to sign the Voting Rights Act, Reauthorization Amendments Act of 2000.
I have a thought for every president. So Clinton was, I didn't have sexual relations with that woman. Bush is a shoe got tossed at him. So I'll never forget that. Literally, my man's ducking skills. You saw him? He had a shoe tossed at him. I never heard of a president getting a shoe thrown at him. Maybe a bullet thrown at him, but a shoe? That's disrespectful, bro.
Young people are fired up about the 2008 election.
Large numbers of African Americans are turning up at the polls in what could be a historic turnout among the nation's largest.
It's like a circus act. Oh, wow. The blacks are going to vote.
It's a miracle on Wall Street.
Can you guys believe it? There's going to be a large voting turnout for the blacks. It's like everybody's holding their breath, like they're excited to see. Like we're so much on the outskirts that we're like freaking circus animals that are behind a glass, and they're like, "Hey, look at him, he's so cute."
A lot of votes. Damn. We got a lot of votes.
Minority voting group.
11 o'clock on
a lot
the
of
East
white
Coast,
supremacists vote.
Barack Obama is projected to be the next president.
Hold on. Wait a second. Wait.
She was
look at her.
My
Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is about to be elected, baby. He's about his. Yo, they've been paving the way for this man, bro.
Yeah, look at him. He changed everything, though.
Obama is projected to be the next president of the United
Yes,
States
we can.
of America.
He said. Yes, we can.
40-year high turnout.
Some of these cheating has happened. I don't believe it. I think this is voter fraud.
Several new voting laws recently enacted in the United States.
The Republicans will take control of the House of Representatives.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Experts found that African-American voters were nearly twice as likely to lack voter ID.
So you want to tell them what a voter ID is?
Right. Listen. I'm trying to figure out, anybody in the chats, anybody watching us right now, what in God's name is a voter ID? What is a voter ID? Is it a special ID that I didn't know about, like a CDL license, a gun license?
Never needed
like,
one of those to vote.
You need a special license or an ID to vote? Like I'm curious.
Like it's a special license, bro. Is right. That's
what
crazy.
the hell is voter ID? Yes, because not a black man has a voter ID. Not a white man has a voter ID. What the hell is a voter ID?
Doesn't exist, bro. Just keep going.
For goodness sakes, these politicians, they just make stuff up.
What we've seen this year is by far the most significant rollback of voting rights since the Jim Crow era.
We cut Obama by 5%.
Look at them, look at them, look at them. They're going to go have a margarita after.
Helped a bit in that.
The U.S. Supreme Court today took the teeth out of a law enacted nearly 50 years ago.
Since 1965.
So they, wait. So 50 years go by, now never no one has bats an eye at a specific point in the Civil Rights Bill. But now we're going to change it.
That's my question, bro. What
now
was
we're
passed
going
in
to
the
change
90s? What was passed 2000? Now again in 2013. Like, what are we talking about here?
What
you
happened?
Know what I'm saying?
What happened?
You got to be real specific with me to see where we missed the mark.
I got a
Don't
question.
use these terms.
I got a question. How many black people, since they like to pander to black people, right? How many black people in the 1990s, born year 1990, didn't have a birth certificate? They've been disrespecting us for years, bro.
Yeah.
They've been. How many kids in the 80s, born in the 80s? My sister, my brother were born in the 80s.
Bro,
last time I checked, they're still minorities.
Everybody had that, bro.
So my mom was born in the 50s.
It's called a birth certificate. You get it when you're born, regardless of what hospital
I'm
you're
just
in.
I'm trying to track with you, brother. Like, I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to fight, Savory. I'm not trying to argue with you.
I'm trying to tell people you get it regardless, bro. It ain't a special application.
My mom was born in the 50s. How did she get? My mom, last time I checked, my mom's darker than me. She got a birth certificate. What is it? Oh, you're Hispanic, so you get a birth certificate. You're black, you don't get one. So I'm trying to understand.
Maybe she knew saying you ain't known. Let's keep going, man.
Okay, let's see.
Rights Act has policed voting discrimination, but today's decision effectively puts it on hold.
At issue, a decades-old provision in the law that...
No, I'm just confused. You're referencing the 65 Civil Rights Act on a 2013 Supreme Court case. So it took you decades to come. Anyways, just keep going.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Requires 9 states, mostly in the South, to get approval from the federal government before changing voting laws or procedures.
The ACLU of Wisconsin filed that lawsuit today, calling the state's voter ID law unconstitutional. Today, the ACLU...
Voter ID law unconstitutional.
How were we doing
at face value? At face value. What the hell are you talking about?
You can't make this up, bro.
ACLU, which is a liberal legal term. You have
litigation.
The ACLU and you have the ACLJ. The ACLJ is Jordan Seculo, represented the Orange Man, represented even Clinton, right? But they're more conservative leaning. ACLU are the guys that are like literally in protest. You know, they're wearing vests at protests, providing legal advice. The 2 people who were arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail in New York City, guess who they worked for?
ACLU.
Oh, okay. There we go. Freaking lunatics.
A lawsuit challenging recent cuts in voting hours.
Seems like we're playing like a game of whack-a-mole right now.
Whack-a-mole.
Every time we whack down something like a voter ID law, some new tactic pops up.
Get him out of there. Get him out of there. Get him out of there. He figured it out. Get him out of there. He figured...
You can't make this
From
up.
Texas to Virginia, state and local governments have taken steps to require voter identification, eliminate same-day registration, and to limit voting hours and locations.
Federal Appeals Court has struck down a North Carolina voter ID law. Civil rights groups have slammed the law, claiming it discriminates against minorities and the poor.
They said it was clear.
In 2016,
yo,
you can't make this up.
That the intent was to target African Americans with, quote, surgical precision.
You can't make this stuff up. Honestly.
Yeah,
like, you can't make this stuff up.
Would you say this is an example? I think it's great you played that video, Macho, because this is an example how they strategically use a situation to kind of like position themselves as the savior for our people, right? For Hispanics and all that, but they're really, really talking down right? They're not capable of getting a voter ID. They really can't make it to the polls. They need more time. They don't have an ID. They can't walk to the polls. Like, it's a list of excuses
They're
making it
idiots,
seem
so we
like
have to
we're
keep making
disabled.
up these new rules. They're dumb. They don't have access to IDs. Listen, I've heard somebody made the excuse, y'all, and I'm gonna wrap up Inner City Talks with this. I've heard someone made the excuse that there were people born in this country outside of a hospital because they didn't have money, so therefore they didn't have birth certificate, which led to them not having an ID. Do you understand the fraction of people that may be? Because everyone thereafter is probably born in a hospital because of the new medical changes, right? You can't deny someone. So yeah, if a woman walks into an emergency room, she's like, "Oh, I'm going into labor." You can't be like, "Well, you don't have insurance, can't take you in here."
Yeah,
No, they don't do that. They don't do that now.
Not in
They
this
probably
country.
have been doing this now since the 60s. They haven't been turning people away for emergency needs. So everyone thereafter has access to medical care, has had access to birth certificate, a social security, which leads you to getting an ID. Where is the
Crazy.
suppression? You know what it is? Here's what it is. You want to know what it is? They're not voting. So they need to give a spark. They're not voting because of this. They're not voting because of that. So therefore, we're going to inspire them to say, let's make it easier for them so that there's no hindrance. But
Exactly.
it hasn't
Yeah,
happened.
I'm with you.
That hasn't happened. So
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And I want to highlight right now as we transition here. Let's look at how many states you think changed. Let me ask you this before transition. How many states you think changed any kind of legislative laws for the 2020 election? Out of the 50, how many you think changed?
I would say maybe 30 states.
30 plus states. That's more than half, right?
I was joking. I didn't think it was that much. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And
30
check
plus.
this out. I'm going to give a quick overview of some of these things. 9 states made changes to their voter registration systems. Many of these changes involved improving online registration. So more people than ever registered online, pre-registered, creating programs for recently incarcerated people to vote, right? Number 1. That's 9 states did that, right? 12 states changed their deadline for mail-in ballot applications, right? What does that mean? They just extended it, gave people more time to vote. 5 of these states decreased the amount. 6 states increased the amount voters have to apply for mail-in ballots, like California, Massachusetts, for example, right? Let's keep going here, right? This is just giving a glimpse of there's never been so many changes at the state level through the state legislature. Many passed laws regarding official ballot drop boxes, set up election for voters to return absentee ballots. These states decreased the amount of ballot drop boxes. Rapid fire here. 10 state laws regarding signature matching. So that's another added thing. 4 states passed a law allowing forms of student ID and documents to be used as voter ID. 8 states passed laws changing early voting period, right? Again, and I'm reading a glimpse of all these. 7 of these states extended early voting to include additional days. All right, this is all in the name of COVID, right? And I want to highlight something right here, right? I want to highlight something because this is the point in sharing this. I want people to think about this really quick, right?
And
So
why do you think they changed those laws?
That's a great question. I think COVID, in my opinion, was used as an excuse to bring in more laws that are beneficial for certain people in power, right? For next elections, for that election to get Trump out, I think was one of it, to be honest, but I won't make that as the main thing, right? I won't go into some big kind of theory of getting him out, but I think that was a part of it. But all in all, it's more control over elections. These laws just give less power to the people, more power to the actual politicians in power, right?
Wow.
And check this out. In 2018, 19 states, this is 2018, 43.1% of U.S. voters required a qualifying excuse, such as illness, travel, or age, for those voters seeking to vote by absentee or mail-in ballots. Right? Pretty easy to understand,
43%?
which means
Wow.
it was really 43% of U.S. voters, right? But again, And that was 19 states, so that's not across, right? Certain states are like 10% far. It's just you need a valid excuse, right? According to state policy, so this is the second section right here. Look how drastically things change, right? If you see right here where my mouse is, let me highlight this again. All right, right here. According to state policies in place in September 28th, approximately 85 of U.S. voters reside in states that would allow all voters to cast ballots by mail. So we went from
43
qualifying
to
excuse.
85?
This is the excuse you needed before. Illness, travel, or age. Now we're up to 85% that would allow all voters, not some, all voters. You can be an 18-year-old, you could be a 21-year-old athlete, you can be in college, you can be across
literally
the
vote
street
from
from
your
a poll.
phone. You can vote
Bro,
from your
you
phone.
can be across the
Just
street from a poll,
ridiculous.
and you
Wow.
can ask for one, right? Which is like, wow.
You just
What
said
kind of
that
changes?
you could be across the street.
Yeah, of course. You can be across the street because, again, the standard was lowered so much, which is why people are complaining about it. So when people talk about voter, mail-in ballot voting is 100% safe and the margin and whatever, we've never done it to this level. So we just don't know. You know what I'm saying? We haven't done it.
And the turnouts is not too high. When people are not happy with government, has nothing to do with a specific person. When people are not happy with government, 65% is not enough for these politicians to sway elections. It's too tight of a margin. So that's why they sparked this whole idea of voter suppression or vote subversion, voter ID,
There's
which
no checks and balances.
these
Our
don't
whole
mean
system,
anything.
Macho,
They
is
don't
checks and
mean anything.
balances. Think about our whole system. It's about checks and balances. So in this country, they try to eliminate those things. If you're mailing in, how do you know you really voted, right? How do you know someone didn't vote twice? How do you know I can't walk to the
There's
poll
no
as well?
integrity, you're saying.
There,
There's no integrity.
yes, you're losing, and then you're adding boxes where anyone can drop stuff off. Who's picking those up? Do I know? Do you know if mine are being counted? Are mine being thrown away somewhere? You don't know. Again,
And who exists at every election poll? I know in New York City, every single one is a police officer there, an agent of the state. Why? Because they have to monitor the integrity of this election.
But again,
they have
that's
to make
one
sure
of the
that
arguments.
you have a Republican representative. You also have a Democrat
Yeah,
representative.
that
to be
also is
fair.
another part which we won't get into today. But some of that changed in the election, where certain people weren't being let in the actual poll places. But let's show this video really quick.
The protest over police brutality against black people is helping.
Like, why do you start with a protest? We're talking about, like, why does this video start like this? Has nothing to do. The title of the video is how voter suppression impacts black voters.
In what realm? Now, I want to ask you a business question because I know you're really savvy in this, right? Savory is savvy in business. Saw what I did there? Anyways. Why does any business focus on 13% of their functioning business? Would that raise your CEO antennas that I got to focus on 13% of my business is not operating well?
Yeah, like on why? You're saying I would want to know why?
Would you as a CEO focus on the inefficiency of 13% of your company? Would that be like a sticking point? Would you go to the office and be like, I want every executive in here because I want to focus on 13% of the business?
Well, there's one way I would.
Okay, tell me.
If the return on those 13% means a lot. For example, like some companies do this, like if you have a few products, but 10% of the products you sell make you a higher profit, then you focus on those 10% more than the other 90. Because you know that by selling 2 t-shirts mean more than just selling socks. If you sell socks and t-shirts, 90% you sell socks, 10% shirts, you'll focus on that. So I think they look at the return on this, on the influence they have over culture, on the communities that they control, and the impact they have over also white people, right? So I feel like they look at the return on this, like investing in this group would have they have power. This group has power, right? They are the oppressed group. They can speak up, people listen. Companies have to listen. We have discrimination laws against them. White people will rally behind them, right? So I think they look at the ripple effect of it.
So what we're seeing is that they are the precious jewels of society.
Yeah, correct.
Because they're literally changing election laws They're judging presidents based off 13% of the population. They're
Correct.
judging economics based on 13% of the population. They're judging our prison system based on 13% of the population. They're judging our sports, everything. Everything is literally pointing towards 13%. And as a CEO, the only reason why I focus on the 13% is if the consumer focuses on the 13%.
Correct. Exactly. So they
That's
look
it.
at their return and then they, yep, exactly.
Hoping to inspire a new wave of Black civic engagement. One of the best ways to create change at all levels of society and have your voice heard is by voting. U.S. civil rights leaders of the past knew this and fought for decades to ensure Black people had the equal right to vote. But even now, there are still barriers for Black people who want to vote.
So now they're comparing the suppression of the 60s to where we're at now.
Why are we
After
making
the
those
Civil War,
comparisons?
the
right?
U.S. passed
Why are we going to
amendments
the
that
Civil War?
constitutionally
Look, I'm
guarantees
curious.
the right for Black men to participate and vote in elections. But Jim Crow laws, state and local laws that enforced racial segregation, were soon enacted across southern
So
states.
now it's a
to
focus on the
disenfranchise
past.
Black voters.
Check this
Voting
out.
Rights Act, allowing states to enact discriminatory voter ID laws and voter purges.
Discriminatory voter ID laws, Macho.
So
We're
break this
back
down.
at it again.
Let's break this down real quick. Discriminatory voter ID laws. This is how crafty. I just heard it right now. I just heard it. We talked about this in preparation, but now it just hit me. Discriminatory voter ID laws. So now they're not even discriminating on you, the race. They're discriminating against your credentials.
Discriminatory voter
ID laws. So they're either saying, well,
but they're
this
saying
doesn't-
the laws affect the minorities because the minorities in these communities don't have IDs, right? That's the implication they're making.
I think they're really talking about the immigrants.
Oh,
I
no.
think they're paving the way for immigration because they're the ones that don't have ID.
Oh, no. I'm with you 100%. I'm just saying at the surface, they're using, because they can't use immigrants because immigrants can't vote in the country unless they don't need ID, then everyone can vote. So I'm with you. That's a good thing to highlight. The real focus in this is they want more people who otherwise wouldn't vote to vote, because when we think about the border and people coming in, disproportionately they do vote Democratic.
But is there
giving them
is
stuff.
there an analysis? Is there really a poll that suggests that, okay, is Black people being discriminated against to vote? Which we know is a no.
No, not that I've seen. I haven't seen anything.
No one's
I've
telling
seen-
them they can't
Yeah,
vote.
yeah.
No one's suppressing them. And this has been happening. This has been a KKK tactic since it started.
Mhm.
They've been playing this game and telling us that there's a suppression when there isn't. For example, in New York City, what hinders us from voting?
Bro.
Any hindrance. Let's just think of hindrance. Let's pander to their side for a sec. Is there any hindrance for us to vote?
Line.
Okay, there's a line.
But everybody
have-
has to make the line.
Everyone has to make the line. Everyone has to stand. It's not like, oh, white
They don't
people
tell me I'm
line
black.
only.
I'll go to the back.
Is
right?
there a
You know,
white people line only that is like a fast track for them, and then the black
the lines
and the
be
Hispanics
crazy in New
gotta-
York to vote, but again, everybody got to go through those lines. So there's nothing, bro. And if it was, we would see it in cities like New York and these inner city places where we are supposed to be discriminated against.
And let's make the comparison, since they like to make the comparison. 1960s, right? Literally, you had whites and blacks only, right? That's discrimination. We clearly are across that juncture. They were also saying you can't vote. They were pushing them away. But they always had the access to vote. We know this in history. Blacks have been able to vote somebody by proxy. So they would go, okay, now we get together.
But that
let's
is
all together.
but I would call that a form of discrimination to stop them and discourage them from voting in a way, right? But
Right,
none of that
because you have
exists
to-
now. Yeah,
You
it's
have
an
to
obstacle
vote
they're
as a
putting.
pool. You have to vote as a pool for one person to vote on behalf of 20.
Exactly.
Right? But
So they
we're
put
not
out-
having any of those
No,
hindrances.
none of that exists, bro. Do you have any?
I can go
said
by
line.
myself. I can go by.
I
If I
said
lived in
line only
Georgia,
came.
if I lived in Georgia and I had a Georgian ID, I have no hindrance. I just go up to the poll and say, I got to stand online. I got to do this. They're arguing over water. Why can't you give them water? Like, really? Is that voting suppression? Now
But
you're
no-
talking about the ID, but there's no such thing as a voter ID. It's a driver's license.
So
That's all you have to do is present that.
So Macho, let me do, before I play this again, 30 seconds here. What do you think happens if we don't need ID to vote? If they really get their way and no state needs ID to vote, what do you think happens in our elections?
Oh, it's a nightmare. We'll never trust the presidency ever again. We'll never trust our local elections again, ever.
That's common sense, bro. And people are ignoring that, which is so crazy. But again, crazy.
In Georgia, hundreds of polling stations in predominantly black and brown communities were closed ahead of the 2018 election.
Black and brown is the key.
Following
it's always the same narrative. Black and brown. Black
new
and
voter
brown.
ID
Black
laws
and
have
brown.
made it more difficult for people of color and college.
So new voter ID, and I want to end it there. New voter ID has made it more difficult for people of color and college students to vote.
Just to be clear, there's no such thing as a voter ID.
Oh yeah, let's get that out of the way. That's a good point.
Just want everybody who's watching, who's going to watch us on replay, there's no such thing as a voter ID. You need to.
There's an ID that 99% of the population have at one point in their life, and if you lose it, you can get a new one. It's not rocket science. You don't need a code. You don't need a proxy. You don't need no one to walk you to where they get the ID. Everything is done online. There's no difficulty. So the simple fact they're implying that for people of color, and they added college students. Bro, what like I asked my wife, when you're in college, were you ever discriminated because was it difficult for you to get an ID? Everybody in the hood had ID. Liquor store, we went to the club. Every single person I know had an ID. I knew some people who didn't walk around.
You get a bar ID? Do you get a bar ID? Like to go to the bar and have a drink?
Here we go. You see?
Do you get a cigarette ID? What about a car ID to buy a car? Is there an ID? Like, what are we living in? A communist country? A voter ID? There's no such thing as voter ID.
No. It's an ID.
It's an ID.
It's an ID. And just how Macho is saying, the point is, if you can't get an ID, I want to hear why. If you're watching this on replay, and if you really can't get an ID, please tell us why. One, not trying to be sarcastic, we can help you. And two, we would doubt that we would hear about people who can't get IDs unless you're arguing with somebody coming illegally who doesn't have an ID and you want them to vote. Like Macho says, that's really the only argument.
Today's Sip on Facts is the mayor of New York City in 1933, Rogelio LaGuardia. I always like to keep going to him because he is the father of the projects. He is the reason why we have a NYCHA in New York City.
Oh, wait, I just realized the high school was named after him.
LaGuardia High School, the Performing Arts High School, which has probably very little correlation. I don't know why they named a Performing Arts High School after a guy who was...
Oh, no, they put names on people who want names. They could pay for it. They put you on a library if you got enough money. That's what it is. But yeah, go ahead.
Mayor Jimmy Walker and his Irish-run Tammany Hall were forced out by office by a scandal, and LaGuardia was determined to replace him. The sticking point here in Sip on Facts is the Tammany Hall Irish-run people, right? Irish people came to the States, and they were very good at holding public office. Why? Because they were highly discriminated against. They held public office. They were police officers. They were firemen since the early days in the 1900s. And the reason why is in their minds, they said, if we're going to reach economic success, we need to have political success. So they took the political route to then earn themselves the economic route as a whole, as an ethnicity. But what we realized with LaGuardia's mayor election, with his running for mayor in 1933, is that there was extreme corruption that kept the Irish people in office. So part of what I'm explaining here on Sip on Facts is probably the reason why your state, your county, your area is staying a certain party could be some element of corruption. That's what I'm highlighting there. And you'll know that when a new person comes in and they're of a different party, and all of a sudden there's a ripple effect of things that are flowing that you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, how is this? Why is that? Is it just purely the man, purely the woman? I will tell you, it's like an organized crime, in my opinion. That's what I say. Any thoughts there, Savory?
Yeah. I think that is a great thought. I think that leads us also, I want people to stay tuned. Friday, we are going to get into examining candidates specifics, and we're probably also touching on gerrymandering and what that means, and kind of break down some of these voters. So we're going to end on this topic Friday. Stay tuned. Come join us. Macho, thank you for that sip on facts. Much love, everybody.